Hello, in this video I'm going to talk about the hormonal control of the female reproductive system functions. So we're going to use hormones here, and this is going to start with the hormone from the hypothalamus called Gonadotropin-Releasing Hormone, also known as GnRH. So as the name suggests, this causes the release of other hormones, which are going to affect the gonads. So gonadotropin-releasing hormone travels from the hypothalamus and it goes to the anterior or front of the pituitary, where it causes the release of FSH and LH hormones. FSH stands for follicle stimulating hormone, and it's named for the fact that it stimulates follicles to grow in the female ovary. Luteinizing hormone, or LH, stimulates the ovaries to increase their secretions of estrogen and progesterone. And we'll talk about the way it's named in a little bit. So estrogen is the primary female reproductive hormone, and estrogen is going to be released in mass starting at puberty. And when estrogen is released at puberty, it's going to cause the production of the female secondary sex characteristics, which include development of the mammary glands and breasts, fat deposition in the breasts, thighs, and hips, and growth of body hair in the axilla and the pubic regions. Estrogen also increases libido in females, and it causes the growth and maintenance of the female sex organs, and it also helps to grow bones. Menopause occurs when the ovaries run out of eggs. When the ovaries run out of eggs, they stop making estrogen and progesterone. And then the menstrual periods stop, hence menopause. Menopause have a lot of symptoms associated with it, including hot flashes, which are thought to be caused by the roller coaster of hormones that are going up and down in the female during the beginning of menopause. So the female sexual cycle takes about, on average, 28 days, but this can vary from person to person. And the female sexual cycle is going to involve changes in both the ovaries and the uterus, hence we call it the ovarian cycle and the uterine or menstrual cycle. And this is, of course, controlled by hormones. The hypothalamus releases gonadotropin-releasing hormone, which causes the release of luteinizing hormone and follicle-stimulating hormone from the pituitary, which then travel to the ovaries and cause the release of estrogen and progesterone, which then, amongst other things, affect the uterus. The uterus itself does not produce hormones. And the hormones exhibit negative feedback control. And what this means is that when the estrogen and progesterone levels are high, this turns off GnRH, which will then turn off LH and FSH. However, when there are low levels of estrogen and progesterone, this will cause the release of GnRH, which will then increase the release of LH and FSH. So let's first take a closer look at the ovarian cycle. Now with the ovarian cycle, we're looking at the changes that occur in the ovaries within that 28-day cycle. So what's happening in the ovaries? Well, only one follicle with one oocyte inside of it will mature in one ovarian cycle. And the reason for this is really complicated, and it's actually still being studied. Why is it just one oocyte and one ovary matures? And we do know some things about it, but other things are still under investigation. So what happens is the follicle begins to secrete more and more estrogen as it grows larger and larger. Eventually, the mature follicle ruptures, and this releases the oocyte into the fluid around the ovaries. And this process is called ovulation. The leftover bits and pieces of the ruptured follicle are repaired, forming a structure called the corpus luteum. And the corpus luteum begins to secrete large amounts of progesterone. If fertilization and implantation do not occur, then the corpus luteum will degenerate and the levels of estrogen and progesterone will decrease. And then we kind of go back to the beginning. One more follicle will begin to grow, etc., etc. If fertilization and implantation do occur, then the corpus luteum is maintained and progesterone levels are maintained until the placenta is developed, in which case the placenta then takes over the process of producing progesterone. Progesterone is necessary to prevent menstruation and maintain pregnancy. What's causing these things to occur in the ovarian cycle? Well, it's hormones. Hormones are regulating the ovarian cycle. So What happens is at the beginning of the cycle, gonadotropin-releasing hormone is released by the hypothalamus. It goes to the pituitary where it causes the release of FSH and LH. The FSH and LH go to the ovaries, and the FSH stimulates one follicle and one oocyte inside of it to mature. Follicle stimulating hormone stimulates the follicle, right? As the follicle stimulates, it grows and grows, and as it grows, it begins to release more and more estrogen. When the estrogen reaches a critical concentration, there's a surge of gonadotropin-releasing hormone that becomes released. And this is followed by a surge in the release of specifically luteinizing hormone. The surge in luteinizing hormone causes the mature follicle to rupture, and this releases the oocyte through the process of ovulation. The remnants of the ruptured follicle then repair, becoming the corpus luteum, and the corpus luteum secretes large amounts of progesterone. Right? And as I mentioned before, if fertilization and implantation do not occur, the corpus luteum will degenerate and the levels of estrogen and progesterone decrease. Right? And then as those levels decrease, the low levels of estrogen and progesterone feed back to the hypothalamus, causing the release of gonadotropin-releasing hormone, starting the cycle again. Occurring at the same time is the menstrual or uterine cycle. The menstrual or uterine cycle is looking at the changes occurring in the uterus during the female cycle. So it's the hormones coming out of the ovaries that are having a big impact on the uterus. So estrogen from the follicle of the ovary causes an increase in the thickness of the endometrium of the uterus, that internal lining of the uterus, basically preparing the endometrium for the implantation of a developing embryo. Progesterone coming from the corpus luteum of the ovary is causing further development of the endometrium. The endometrium gets even bigger. Right? The endometrium begins to store glycogen and fat, which will provide nutrition for the embryo should implantation occur. Right? But if fertilization and implantation do not occur, estrogen and progesterone levels decrease, causing the endometrium to slough off. If implantation does occur, the embryo releases its own hormone called human chorionic gonadotropin hormone, or HCG. And HCG communicates with the corpus luteum, maintaining the corpus luteum, maintaining progesterone levels. Now remember, if progesterone levels fall, menstruation will occur. If menstruation occurs with an embryo in the uterus, then the embryo will be sloughed off along with the menstrual fluid. So we need to maintain those progesterone levels in order to maintain the pregnancy. A pregnancy test is actually measuring the levels of HCG in the urine.